Thank you for joining me. Tonight we take up science as a light along the path and introduce the fourth of a series of programs produced by Spiritfire and myself that look at the spiritual path and humanity's trajectory along it. We first looked at theology, the world religions, the world spiritual sciences, and we looked at how they are included in one another, what they have in common, and where they diverge. We also looked at how that has propelled humanity forward in its spirituality down through the ages. Next, we looked at the path itself, the spiritual path, through largely the lens of elements and initiations. Most recently, we looked at the spiritual path from the point of view of philosophy. And philosophy, as it not only has come down to us from the great philosophers, male and female, but how philosophy is part of our everyday life right now, including how you live your philosophical principles in your life. Lastly, we're going to take up the idea of science as illuminative of humanity's potential through its intellect, through intuition, through the mysteries of life itself and the investigation of those mysteries. And so as a result of that, we will see that in fact science is revelatory and a light along the spiritual path. We can begin by saying, what would you consider to be scientific discoveries that have illumined humanity's spiritual path? Well, what about the discovery of electricity? And that, of course, is recognized largely by Benjamin Franklin here in the U.S., but the discovery of electricity was going on both sides of the Atlantic. And then what about the ancients, who clearly had an understanding of electricity? Maybe for you, something about the understanding of the electromagnetic field, put forward first by Faraday and then taken up by Maxwell, etc. Or maybe before that, Newton's revelations regarding gravity. As we look at these options as to what you might consider, or I might consider, the illuminations along the path, we see that they are diverse and quite comprehensive. Then we have the inner workings of the human body, put forward by the ancient Greeks long before physical anatomy was done by Harvey or by even Leonardo da Vinci. We also have the sciences that tell us that we have a shared existence on Earth, that we are sharing our planet with all the plants, all the animals, above the oceans, in the oceans, etc. And so these two illumine for us our collective responsibility, our collective way of living with the Earth. Then you might have thought, well, what about the astrophysics? What about quantum physics? What about our place in the universe? That this, too, is a set of sciences that illumine for us our spiritual path and ourselves as human beings. We could even add to that mythology, psychology, the various world civilizations that, if looked at from an archaeological, paleontological point of view, a civilization point of view, are clearly illuminative to us as to who and what we have been. There also is, of course, geology, and how geology and its forces have made the planet be what it is. Do we really understand those processes? What about the solar systemic influences? Do we understand those processes? And as we seek to understand them, these, of course, constantly call upon not only our intellect, but our intuition. And so the Master DK gave us just that. He told us that through intellect, leading to intelligence, leading to intuition, that we as a collective race will proceed, that it is through the sciences that the soul will be discovered and quantified Quantified meaning just validated. And what we find as well is when we add to our curiosity a sense of empathy, then this brings forward an intuitive response from our heart and our mind. And both of these are aspects of the evolution of the human consciousness and its livingness. What was your first science experiment, and how old were you? Was it in the backyard watching ants? Was it, in my generation, it was making a volcano flow, and the volcano was made of flour and water made into a paste, and you made a volcano and put inside it baking soda and vinegar, and it erupted. And if you're fortunate enough to have a little food coloring, you could make it turn red like lava. So what was your first science experiment? Science, in all its shapes and forms, inner and outer, makes us smile with curiosity. There's a mysterious factor that we are engaging when we engage the sciences. As a child, as an adult, as a professional, we're just in our home, cooking, cleaning, choosing cleaning products, plugging in something to see, make sure that it works. Me right now with my cord not working properly and, doing what I can to try to figure it out, but my problem solving isn't getting that problem solved. Science has often veered us away from the spiritual path through usually codifications of ignorance, bias, fear. And usually the fear has to do with the fear to change or fear to engage the possibilities that will be necessary in order for the new truths to actually be brought forward into our human civilizations. We're at that kind of a crux right now with various different paradigms, for instance, the electric universe trying to show its validity in the wake of a gravity-driven universal model. We have the idea of a unified theory that has yet to be found within quantum physics, and maybe that's because they're looking in the wrong directions, or they're looking for the wrong things to be the unifying factors. We have, of course, that empiricism has led us into a frame of reference to our human beings as living on the earth as individuals, separate, and as in command of everything else, when of course that deletes out the harmony that is actually part of how we live and are to be living on earth along with everything else in harmony. But science often, and quite often, has brought us back to center, brought us back to the light, brought us back to the real, back to the truth. And the examples already given are good examples of what's happening now that are steering us as a collective towards a new day, new understandings. The global climate crisis before us forces us to engage technology in new ways, to create new technologies, and to leave old fossil fuels behind. And who has even asked if fossil fuels are needed by the planet herself for her own reasons? We'll also look at the ancient and unknown scientists. Being unknown, we can't name them, but we can look at the evidence of their wisdom, of their skill. And here, for instance, is a wall in Cuzco, and to this day, how ancient it is unknown. There is the classical science model on that, which is absolutely incorrect. And there is that it has withstood earthquakes to this day. We don't know how they lifted them. We don't know how they chiseled them or somehow etched them perfectly as if machined. We don't know anything. All we know is that this stands as do many thousands of other artifacts around the world, megalithic structures around the world that tell us that the ancients were quite scientifically savvy, in many cases seemingly far more than are we. There also is a side of science that is the mystical. In fact, I think it's safe to say that most scientists, or people, even children who get involved in the sciences, are seeking the mysteries of life. They're seeking to crack codes. They're seeking to understand the deep revelations about something in existence. Well, that's the mystical side of life. And the mystical side of life is the spiritual side of life. So as far as, science might want to say that it is non-religious, non-spiritual. Nonetheless, if you look at it and call a spade, then we will see that these mysteries of life are in fact producing great mystics. Those mystics are called scientists. So very briefly, the upcoming 5-week online course is going to take up these 5 subject matters. The waters of life, with these various presentations and variations on the theme, the origins of life. Can we even say what that is? And how does that affect our understanding of ourselves and the evolution of our consciousness? Looking at the planetary blood systems, the blood systems in ourselves, looking at chi or prana, and looking at petroleum, rivers, glaciers as again part of the great waters of life of Earth. We have to look at the psychological evolution of humanity, maybe even of the animal kingdom, when we look at the waters of life. And then, of course, there is merging and the mysteries of union held as sacred down through the ages, through all cultures. We'll also look at how the form of the thing and the investigation of the form of the thing, no matter what we're talking about, pushes the edge of our currently accepted paradigms. The picture on the screen is of Cappadocia in Turkey. Cappadocia is one of the few extant, amazing structural cities. The age of this is literally millions of years old, and must be because of the geological changes that are obvious in the stone itself. Yet, as you can see, these are structures for living beings, etched somehow into the stone. We'll look at other inner structures, such as anatomy, physics, quantum physics, astrophysics, and touch into the electric universe theory. Then, with another week, we will look at the pervasive invisible forces of Earth and of consciousness. Are there 4 fundamental forces? Gravity, the strong and weak force, and electromagnetism. Are those really the 4? We will look at consciousness and the life principle as forces. How the Earth is crisscrossed by ley lines, and those then mimic within ourselves as the acupuncture meridians, as the sacred channels for yoga and for the process of health and enlightenment. We'll also look at the spiritual path as a science. For instance, the science of meditation, the science of yoga, the science of the various disciplines within the many spiritual practices of the planet. But there is a science, a methodology, there is a certain results that are intended. And lastly, we will look at the thresholds that we are standing upon now, and look at some of these quotes, that science will reveal the fact of the soul by Master DK. From the book Electric Universe, we will look at that model, and we will look at optics, which is a fascinating subject because it is the subject of light and how humanity interacts with light itself. So from Da Vinci to Goethe to the double slit experiment and particle physics that seems to show that light is both a particle and a wave onto inner realizations of reality, and again, the process of enlightenment. Here's a partial bibliography of some of the things that we might refer to. And that's it. So join me, making it rather short and sweet here because it's that simple. Science illumines the way. Join me for this class. Think you'll have fun? I know I will. I love this subject, as I love everything about the spiritual path. You can register at spiritfire.com/science/HTML. We want to acknowledge the artist that gave us the first image on the front of the screen. And I wish you well and hope you'll join me. Love you all. Create a day, a luminous, beautiful, harmonious day.